The things they carried were largely determined by necessity. Among the necessities or near necessities were P-38 can openers, pocket knives, heat tabs, wristwatches, dog tags, mosquito repellent, chewing gum, candy, cigarettes, salt tablets, packets of Kool-Aid, lighters, matches, sewing kits, military payment certificates, sea rations, and 2 or 3 canteens of water. Henry Dobbins, who was a big man, carried extra rations. Dave Jensen, who practiced field hygiene, carried a toothbrush, dental floss, and several hotel-sized bars of soap he'd stolen. Ted Lavender, who was scared, carried tranquilizers and 6 or 7 ounces of premium dope until he was shot in the head outside the village of Tonki in mid-April. They carried the standard fatigue jackets and trousers. Very few carried underwear. Norman Bowker carried a diary. Rat Kiley carried comic books. Kiowa, a devout Baptist, carried an illustrated New Testament. Because the nights were cold and because the monsoons were wet, each carried a green plastic poncho that could be used as a raincoat or ground sheet or makeshift tent. With its quilted liner, the poncho weighed almost 2 pounds, but it was worth every ounce. In April, for instance, when Ted Lavender was shot, they used his poncho to wrap him up, then to carry him across the paddy, then to lift him into the chopper that took him away. Some carried themselves with a sort of wistful resignation, others with pride or stiff soldierly discipline, or good humor or macho zeal. They were afraid of dying, but they were even more afraid to show it. They found jokes to tell. They used a hard vocabulary to contain the terrible softness. Greased, they'd say. Offed, lit up, zapped while zipping. They kicked corpses, they cut off thumbs, they talked grunt lingo. They told stories about Ted Lavender's supply of tranquilizers, how the poor guy didn't feel a thing when he was shot, how incredibly tranquil he was. They carried all the emotional baggage of men who might die. Grief, terror, love, longing, these were intangibles, but the intangibles had their own mass and specific gravity. They had tangible weight. They carried shameful memories. They carried the common secret of cowardice, barely restrained, the instinct to run or freeze or hide, and in many respects this was the heaviest burden of all. It was not courage, exactly. The object was not valor. Rather, they were too frightened to be cowards. At night, not quite dreaming, they gave themselves over to lightness, because at night, there was nothing to carry. One story I've never told before. Not to anyone. Not to my parents, not to my brother or sister, not even to my wife. By putting the facts down on paper, I'm hoping to relieve at least some of the pressure on my dreams. Still, it's a hard story to tell. The draft notice arrived on June 17th, 1968. I remember opening up the letter, scanning the first few lines, feeling the blood go thick behind my eyes. I remember a sound in my head. It wasn't thinking, just a silent howl. I was too good for this war, too smart, too compassionate, too everything. It couldn't happen. I was above it. Student body president and a full ride to Harvard. I was no soldier. I remember the rage in my stomach, a mixture of anger and self-pity and numbness. I thought about running away to Canada. My instincts were telling me to make a break for it, just to take off and run and never stop. Run, I'd think. Then I'd think, impossible. Then a second later, I'd think, run. It was a moral split. I couldn't make up my mind. I feared the war, yes, but I also feared exile. I was afraid of walking away from my own life, my friends, my family, my whole history, everything that mattered to me. I cracked. Quickly, almost without thought, I drove north. It's a blur now. All I can remember is a sense of high velocity and the feel of the steering wheel in my hands. I was riding on pure adrenaline. After driving for 2 days straight, I pulled into an old fishing resort. The man who opened the door that day is the hero of my life, Elroy. How do I say this without sounding sappy? The man who saved me. He offered exactly what I needed, without questions, without any words at all. He took me in, a silent, watchful presence. I never told Elroy about the draft letter. He never asked. But one morning, I found an envelope tacked to my cabin door. Inside were $200 and a note that said, "Emergency Fund." The man knew. On the last day of my stay, Elroy took me fishing on the rainy river. For a time, I didn't pay attention to anything, just feeling the cold spray against my face. But then it occurred to me that at some point, we must have passed into Canadian waters, across the dotted line between 2 different worlds. And I remember a sudden tightness in my chest as I looked up and watched the far shore come at me. This wasn't a daydream, it was tangible and real. That close, and I could see the delicate leaves, the texture of the soil, the needles beneath the pines. I could have done it. I could have jumped and started swimming for my life. I couldn't decide, I couldn't act. I couldn't comport myself with even a pretense of modest human dignity. All I could do was cry. At the end of the boat, Elroy Birdall pretended not to notice. He held a fishing rod in his hands, his head bowed to hide his eyes. He kept humming a soft, monotonous little tune. All of a sudden, Canada became a pitiful fantasy. It was no longer a possibility. Right then, with the shore so close, I understood I would not swim away from my hometown and my country and my life. I would not be brave. I was going to Vietnam. I felt a sudden swell of helplessness come over me, a drowning sensation, as if I had toppled overboard and was being swept away by the silver waves. I would go to the war. I would kill and maybe die, because I was embarrassed not to. That was the sad thing. And so I sat in the boat, and cried. In Vietnam, I had a friend named Bob Kiley, but we all called him Rat. He told me the story that I'll never forget. When he first arrived in country, before joining Alpha Company, Rat had been assigned to a small medical detachment up in the mountains. Sometime later, a young medic named Mark Fosse flew his girlfriend to Vietnam. Everyone thought he was crazy, but here he was, escorting his beloved out of a helicopter. Mark Fosse grinned and said, "Guys, this is Mary Ann." She smiled and waved. Weeks later, the crew started to notice her curiosity. She was sharp, a quick learner, and pretty soon she was tending to patients and assembling weapons. She had stopped wearing skirts and jewelry, and her bright personality was slowly fading. One night, Fosse approached Rat and said, "Mary Ann, I can't find her. Gone. I don't know what to do." He looked like he wanted to collapse. Fosse and Rat searched all night around the base. She was nowhere to be found. The next morning, Rat found Fosse squatting near the edge of the woods, his face wet and shiny. "Hear that?" he whispered. "You hear? It's Mary Ann." Fosse and Rat made their way into the woods. Suddenly, she appeared in shadows. In the morning light, her face had the composure of someone perfectly at peace with herself. But the grotesque part, he said, was her jewelry. A necklace of human tongues. "Fosse," she said softly, "you're in a place where you don't belong. If I know exactly who I am, you can't feel that anywhere else." Mary Ann walked into the mountains and did not come back. Mark Fosse stood rigid. Rat said solemnly, "It's too late, Fosse. She's gone." Some still believed she was still somewhere out in the dark. Late at night, some men thought they almost saw her sliding through the shadows. Not quite, but almost. She'd crossed to the other side. She was part of the land, wearing her necklace of human tongues. She was dangerous. She was ready for the kill. One early morning, I moved out to an ambush site. I kneeled there and waited, holding 3 grenades and a rifle. I had been waiting for almost half an hour when I saw a young man come out of the trees. He carried his weapon in one hand, moving without any hurry up to the center of the trail. I had already pulled the pin on the grenade. I'd come up to a crouch. It was entirely automatic. I was terrified. There were no thoughts about killing. The grenade was to make him go away, just evaporate. I'd already thrown the grenade before telling myself to throw it. The young man dropped his weapon and began to run. It occurred to me then that he was about to die. His rubber sandals had been blown off. He lay at the center of the trail, his right leg bent beneath him, his one eye shut, his other eye a huge star-shaped hole. It was not a matter of live or die. There was no real peril. And it will always be that way. Everything was black and wet. The field just exploded. Rain and slop and shrapnel, nowhere to run. He had heard a mortar in the mud, and then somebody screamed. It was Kiowa. I knew it. Along the perimeter, there were quick bursts of gunfire. When I got there, Kiowa was almost completely under. I grabbed Kiowa by the boot and tried to pull him out. I pulled hard, but Kiowa was gone. And suddenly I felt myself going too. Not here, I thought. Not like this. I released Kiowa's boot and watched it slide away. I'm 43 years old, and a writer now. And even still, right here, I keep dreaming my friends alive. Ted Lavender and Kiowa and a slim young man I killed. They're all dead. But in the story, which is a kind of dreaming, the dead sometimes smile and sit up and return to the world.
Complicate their minds by chasing after money and dreams that can't come true. I'm glad that we are different.